My name is John Mark Bekwi. My question goes to Dr. Afari-Gyan. So I listened to some media reports sometime in August last year where you advised or suggested to the NDC to go back to the IPAC. Now, in this forum, you have also given us the understanding that the Electoral Commission has a sound legal regime that makes it independent, such that if the IPAC shouts, or as loud as they shout, or as loud as they make their concerns louder, the EC is not bound to, as it were, accept that. Or even if they come to a decision by consensus, the EC can equally by itself also, set that aside and act in the interest of their independence. So my question is, how would you juxtapose your suggestion or advice to a party that feels that its views are not being entertained or accepted at IPAC, to go back to IPAC where that body with which it goes back to also does not seek to, accept its views?
CDD had a study which proved that there was excessive monetization of our politics and illicit funding of our politics. And there were ensuing working group discussions which had representation from all the parties, including the minority parties. And it was interesting to know that the two major parties agreed that they were being bitten, they were feeling the bite of the monetization of our politics. And if they are feeling the bite of the monetization of politics, imagine we, the small ones, we've just been eaten up by it. So I would like to ask, what has the EC done? A lot of people say the EC is just a supervisory body over our elections. Does it have a regulatory body over the parties? And does it have the power to find out how political parties and candidates are being financed, apart from the requirements that candidates should, what is the word, file our public declaration of our assets. Apart from that, there's nothing else that shows that requires the EC to look into the financing of political parties. I would like to know what has been done, or what is going to be done, or can be done to look into political party financing, not just the political parties, but also candidates.
Yeah, I have a problem with the tenure, the 4-year tenure that we have presently in our constitution. And you realize that the first year is for the appointment of ministers. The last year is for campaign and other short-cutting jobs. So if anything at all, and it's going to our panelists, I'm of the opinion that we should have a 7-year, 1-term, 7-year. You serve 7 years, you are not eligible for re-election. And I think if we look at that one, that's the only thing I think we can do about the constitution. So the panelists, that's for you.
Just a question for you. If the person is messing up, you have no choice to stay.
No problem with that. The 7-year will pass. There are other organs that will take the person on.
One key principle of law is the sanctity of law, which makes it predictable in its determination. Now, we would all agree that one aspect of our constitution which has suffered certainty has to do with its interpretation and how it has been interpreted. On one breath, the originalist approach has been used for at a point in time we've looked to living constitutionalism. At the point we've looked at it or construed the constitution and its provisions purposively. Now, my question to the former attorney generals are, is it possible for us to include or amend the constitution to include some rules? Because we know that the Interpretation Act cannot be used in interpreting, construing the Constitution. So is it possible for us to have some rules of interpretation in the Constitution as an amendment?
The independence of the EC, let us put it in proper perspective, okay? I think it's a good idea that the Constitution guarantees the independence of the Electoral Commission. And what it says is that it shall not take direction from any person or authority in doing its work. It's the way you interpret any person or authority is very important. Any person includes the president. All right? If the president of the country cannot give direction or instructions to the Electoral Commission, why should political parties be in a position to give instructions to the Electoral Commission? So let us put it in perspective. You are not going to the IPAC to tell the Electoral Commission that you must do this. You're going there to discuss. Look, if you look at the number of changes that have been made to our electoral system through discussions at IPAC, you can't believe it. The introduction of the transparent ballot box, for example, all right? The idea, the politicians used to go and lie when they lost elections, that, when they were bringing the ballot boxes to the team, they were half filled, and so on. So, from just the psychological point of view, it is important to remove that kind of suspicion surrounding ballot boxes and so on. So, in fact, it came from the political parties. Why don't we do a transparent ballot box? At that time, the Ghana government wasn't willing to do it. It's the Danish government, Danida. We approached Danida. Danida is the one that did our first set of transparent ballot boxes. That removed an important misgiving surrounding the election. All right? And the first time we took them to the polling stations, people clapped, which had removed one great excuse that the political, the candidate used to explain their loss and so on. Okay, now we brought, as he said, when we bring it, we turn it upside down, you can see it, and so on. All right? So, the essence of going to IPAC is not to force your views on them. If you go, they know that if what you say will improve the electoral process, first of all, it must be lawful. It must be lawful. That's number one. It must be cost-effective. All right? Somebody asked me many years back, when are you going to introduce electronic voting? I said, when my grandmother knows how to use a computer. And the person said, I had insulted him, I apologize later. But, the environment into which you are introducing the whatever the product, the technology, or whatever, it's very important. It's very important. You must know. And we keep saying that in election administration, for example, you make haste slowly. It appears to be a contradiction in terms, but it's not. That in the introduction of technology, make haste slowly. No, we started the mechanization of our electoral system way ahead of a lot of countries. We used to go to meetings and then people would say, oh, we just started, but we have overtaken you. I said, oh, is that so? Be careful. Be careful. Look, in Kenya, when they introduced it for the first time, they wanted to do everything. They listened to the vendors. that you can do this, can do that, you can do this, can do that. On the day of election, they couldn't report an election results from the polling stations to this. They had to revert back to that. The same thing happened in Malawi. When I went to Malawi, the electoral commissioner said, oh, now we are going to send our results. I said, hey, have you tried it? So you can try it in a room here. The vendors will come and try it in a room here, involving only a few people. That is not the right thing. Go and try it. Some of these machines, they operate differently in the south than in the north. When they're exposed to the extreme heat in the north, after a certain period of time, boom, they just go kaput. So, discussion, bring up good ideas if everybody thinks that it is a good idea. As long as it is lawful and it is cost-effective, the Electoral Commission is inclined to implement it. And that should be the aim when you go to the IPAC. So it is not incompatible to say that the Electoral Commission is independent and say at the same time that go there and have a discussion and try to come to a consensus. It is, the two are not incompatible. Okay, the next question about proportional representation. Well, I remember that the Constitutional Committee proposed, yes, the Constitutional Committee proposed that Ghana should try some form of proportional representation. This was shot down by the Consultative Assembly. The Consultative Assembly was the one who said no to proportional representation. And the funny idea or funny reason that they gave was that it's too complicated for our people to understand. My God. What about the other countries that understand proportional representation? Lesotho, okay? South Africa, Lesotho, and so on and so forth. Are they more intelligent than we are? They say that is too difficult for our people here to understand. Paradoxically, they recommended that later on the Electoral Commission may. But that's not a constitutional provision. It's merely a suggestion. All right. So, first of all, there are different forms of proportional representation. And if we are going to use proportional representation, we must examine the various forms critically and see which one would be appropriate for us. You know, when I once went to Nigeria, we were doing pre-election assessment. And that commission had recommended the mixed member parallel. And we said no. Mixed member parallel will accentuate the dominance of the two parties. What you need is to get, as many parties involved as possible. So that is why I'm recommending the mixed member proportional, the one that is being used in Lesotho. Fortunately, Lesotho used to have a fight all the time when they were using the first past the post. Since they switched to the mixed member proportional, they have never fought, over the elections and so on. Yeah, the vote buying and the monetization, I think we have to separate the two. Monetization, excessive monetization is bad. But there can be excessive monetization without vote buying. All right? And let me talk about the excessive monetization. This was recognized by the Electoral Commission a long time ago. And strenuous efforts were made by the Commission to get what we call the public support public support for the political parties. Some people say public funding. And we went all the way to producing a document over the years describing how the shape of the public funding. And let me tell you that this issue of public funding is the one that tells me that our parties in Ghana are not very principled. They have no principled stand. Today, when they are in opposition, they want public funding. When they are in opposition, they want public funding because they have difficulty, accessing funds. When they get into power, they don't want public funding. There is no principled stand on public funding. And unless we get a principled stand on public funding, there's nothing that the Electoral Commission can do to help. In fact, the scheme that we did, out of the public funds, a certain portion was reserved to support parties that will nominate more women candidates. A certain portion was reserved for that. So if you had no woman candidate, then you couldn't draw money from that portion. Because, introducing percentages, the parties won't do it. But maybe if they had to draw money from then they would do that. But the vote buying is bad. Excessive monetization is bad. Because the people who contribute to the campaigns and so on, they don't do it for fun. They expect rewards. And that accounts, in part, for some aspects of corruption in public life. Now, the 4-year support, no, I think I will leave the rest of it to you. Okay. So the independence of the Electoral Commission, let us put it in perspective. We don't want anybody dictating to the Electoral Commission. But go there and have a good discussion with them. If what you are saying is in the interest of the country, I think they will look very favorably to it.
The 4-year, the gentleman saw the reaction in the room. I think this room is a cross-section of Ghanaians. Ghanaians do not want to put their life in anybody's hands for 7 years. After 4 years, you go. If they don't like you, they say, Bokoaya. Mokoaba, that's all. If they like you, stay. I agree with you that we spend quite a lot of time politicking, first year, second year, third year, and so on. But it will improve over time. And then hopefully also, as we continue to break the 8, we'll have longer governments. Somebody is threatening me, Omara. I'm being threatened.
The speaker has not seen it.
You haven't seen it?
No.
Thank you. Then also the lawyer who talked about the different approaches, I would have given the dean the opportunity to have written a book on constitutional law, constitutionalism. But I assure you that the Supreme Court is tilted towards a purposive approach to interpreting constitutions. They've said it time and time again. There are times that they've used it that I've thought that they shouldn't have used it. And in fact, we should not, you cannot limit a court in that way in the Constitution. When Soa said that the Constitution is a living organism, he said that in the context of the Supreme Court being in the position to conceptualize or put the Constitution in context at every time. There was a time that in America, women did not have the right to vote. There was a time that black people were seen as 3/5 of a human being. In fact, there was a time that there was affirmative action in order to. Today, so I think the Supreme Court has said that there should be no alternative action. Roe versus Wade. You see, so the Supreme Court, that's when people talk about we have to amend. The Supreme Court should be allowed to grow the Constitution. They have to give decisions and so on. So, young man, Bojidi, everything's under control.
Let me add to that the framers of the Constitution in their wisdom gave the Supreme Court the power as the only court to decide on or interpret the Constitution when it comes to these things. And once we've given the Supreme Court that power to decide or interpret the Constitution, I do not think that we should take any steps to put in a law how they decide to conduct their interpretation. But as my senior Joe said, the purposive interpretation, it has come to stay. And of course, as you yourself said, there's the Interpretation Act and other aids to interpretation that the court can use. With regard to the 4 years, again, I mean, we've seen what the reaction of the room, and maybe after we win 2024, you probably will want us to stay in power for another.
This would be a good time to promise that if you win, you would introduce.
We'll deliver John Mahama will deliver so well that you probably want him to stay on another 4 years. So 4 years, I think, is enough time, and we shouldn't tinker with it.
We are commending ourselves, all right, but there's something coming up, a certain subculture, that is electoral dispute. You know, people have it in mind that they have to win at all costs, especially their followers. And so they want to use any foul means to win. And that leads to electoral violence. And sometimes some people lose their lives. I don't get it. They're just mere elections. People will die. Now, what is the judiciary and our security doing? Because after the elections, we don't hear anything about who died, what happened, the one who shot the person dead and all that. We don't hear anything.
Very well.
I don't know whether the media too, you are not interested, so you don't follow it.
No.
So that one, I'm throwing it to you. How are we solving it?
I want to believe that we've made politics so lucrative an enterprise that even if you have a PhD or if you're a technology in any field, you are disregarded in society. And it doesn't equate to the income and even as a member of parliament. And I want to believe that the MPs here can attest to the fact that it's burdening them with regards to the society, with their commitment with the ground levels. So what I'm trying to say in short is that can we have a way whereby we can make politics a regular career that anybody can choose to do, so that those who have the nation interest at heart, which the USRD will call natural leaders, can come to the forefront of leading and delivering service to the good people of Ghana.
I've heard comments being made. I think it was made by Dr. Kwadwo Afari-Gyan about putting in place punitive measures for persons who go to court with election petitions and lose. And I think that Honorable Ghartey also supported that view and said that there was a need to punish people for that. Now, I've been wondering exactly what the basis for that sentiment and recommendation is. Does it have to do with anything that happened in our country? From 2012 to 2020, I know that we've had 2 election petitions. Now, as far as I see it, I do not think any of them were frivolous petitions, actually. Now, in 2012, the decision of the Supreme Court was so close that one could only come to the conclusion that the case that was taken to the court, the issues that had to be decided were not frivolous issues. And so people go to court when they are convinced that there's a real cause of action. In 2020, there was an attempt by the respondents in the case, for instance, to end the life of the petition. And so there was an application to say that the petition that had been brought in real terms was no petition because it had to do with declaration of results. In effect, what they were trying to do was to end the life of that petition. Supreme Court ruled on that and said that there was a matter to be investigated into. We have had 2 so far. Unlike other countries like Nigeria, Nigeria has had its first petition like in 1979. We refer to Bush versus Gore in 2000 as if it was the first case of the other cases. Now, what I'm trying to, I want to find out what is the basis for that sentiment which is strongly expressed, because I disagree with that.
My first concern relates to the substantial time that we have spent on electoral disputes. And the speaker before me, Mr. Kwashiga, has made that point. And I'm wondering why we are not paying equal regard to the victims of injustices in elections. As we speak, the 2020 election led to a situation where 8 people lost their lives. Those people have not received justice. We don't appear to be focusing on that. Does that not embolden people going into the next election where impunity can run sway and people will take the law into their own hands and think that they will get away with it? I filed a petition as Shraj. After a year of investigations, a lot of back and forth, Shraj concluded that their hands were tied because those cases are in court. What is interesting is that you have the Attorney General who attempts to show some interest, so the matter is then categorized as a matter in court, and that's it. It's not being called. I've been following the matter keenly. There's no serious prosecution going on. But because the matter is in court, then Shraj's hand is stayed, and we don't have justice. So I'm very, very worried about that development and what it portends for peace and security going into this year's election and subsequent elections. I also want to raise the issue of the cost on elections. And this is to Dr. Afari-Gyan. From where we sit in Parliament, we are spending so much on elections. I don't know if you have some reflections on how the Electoral Commission can streamline, because this is a country struggling. If you take the 2024 budget, we have approved 786 million Ghana cedis for the 2024 elections. That's a staggering sum. In 2020, because the Electoral Commission said they have to buy equipment, which we thought, we as civil society, thought that there was no need to buy those equipments. We spent over $1 billion. It was $1,063 million Ghana cedis. Imagine what $1 billion can do. I mean, those of us who are from rural Ghana, where even potable water is an issue, you know, healthcare, basic hospital amenities remain an issue. Incubators still an issue. So the cost of elections, yes, you spend substantial time on the politicians' monetization, which I know is an issue. It's important to reflect on that. But the Electoral Commission itself, how much it is spending and who watches the watchman? I mean, they just, you know, bring the bills. We have to approve it. And Dr. Afari-Gyan, you know that since the 2020 election, the development partners have pulled out. So we are now funding fully. The Ghanaian taxpayer is called upon to fund these elections fully. And the cost keeps ballooning. What can be done to reduce the cost of elections and to make the Electoral Commission more efficient? And finally, my final reflection. Dr. Afari-Gyan, can you please help us? Why is it that when political parties are in power, they appear so comfortable with the Electoral Commission? They're so cozy. Suddenly all is fine. It is the opposition parties who are crying wolf always and making all the noise, and they should be ignored. Really, what is there some magic? Because I've been wondering. I've never really been able to get it, you know. So this independence of the Electoral Commission, is it that the independence is only felt when we get into opposition? Then we know that the EC is so independent and they don't listen to the opposition parties. So, I mean, it's been a trend for some years, and I think that Ghanaians would really like to know if there's some secret, if probably there's some high-level meeting that takes place between the Electoral Commissioner and the sitting president that nobody is aware of. And related to that, Umaru, related to that, in 10 seconds, related to that is, and I know my big sister Bridget may not be too comfortable with me on this, but IPAC has been mentioned extensively in this discussion. There is a growing trend where it does appear that some of the parties, and I just don't want to be, I don't want to be accused of pointing direct fingers, but the bigger political parties appear to go to IPAC with their allies. Concerns have been raised now that if the Electoral Commission was doing its work well, strictly enforcing Article 55 of the Constitution, particularly 55(7), that the parties must have representation in all the branches, that they should have offices in 2/3 of districts across the country. A lot of these parties don't qualify to be at IPAC. So IPAC has become, let's mobilize as many people that we can get on our way on the streets. And the Electoral Commission is also not doing its work. And I'm not saying that some of the parties here are probably one of those, but we all know some parties only exist on paper. We all know that. Okay. When is the Electoral Commission going to really clean up? So we sanitize IPAC, and Article 55 will then be respected. So we really know what a political party is, so that IPAC will be credible, so it doesn't become, we have mobilized, those who we can, who are ready to be bought. And the monetization is not only, at the polls in terms of buying delegates, but it involves all of these things. Okay. And I just thought that it would be great to hear what Dr. Afari-Gyan has to say about a lot of these, organizations you can't really call political parties who satisfy the rule.
I am a member of the Special Budget Committee of Parliament, and we approve the budget of the EC. And people do not see the factor that when they quote monies, it's just a quotation. The critical thing is the releases of the money to apply to the functional time for them to do what they do. So you should bear that in mind. If you are not careful and you bring a budget, the budget is a budget. And when even the budget is approved, for you to get the money to perform is another matter. But when you talk about the budget of the EC ballooning, I thought you would talk about financial malfeasance, which has been exposed by the entity that looks into public purse.
Auditor General.
The Auditor General. We are yet to see that there's been very serious financial malfeasance, so we should be careful about some of these things. But with IPAC, I want to say something which is very important, and he was trying to stress it. There's nothing which is wrong with receiving good advice, because you are a stakeholder in the electoral process. But what is very serious that I saw, even when we were doing the budget for the EC, is the dictatorship of individuals who believe that should subvert the independence of and any independent body or above this kind of dictatorship. So when you approach an entity that has constitutional independence, with the greatest of respect, with very persuasive argument, bereft of, insults and, fire play and, it won't work. So please, the political parties should be very careful. We know the frenzy of winning power. We know, we are all aware, the temperature of some people who believe that if they don't win, something is going to happen and the rest of it, no. But that temperature should not equate to dictatorship. They will certainly rebuff. They might not even look at what it is. But when we are very, very piped down and we project sound advice, they are also rational human beings, and they will accept what we are doing, and then the peace will be the outcome.
I think we really need to, if I may use this word, revitalize IPAC. I saw in Liberia just this past, or 2023 elections, that Liberia had almost like a defunct structure similar to IPAC, and they call it the Inter-Party Consultative Committee. But knowing the impact of IPAC on consensus building towards, the electoral process, building the integrity of the system, it was one of the things that we fought hard in Liberia during the elections to make sure that the IPCC in Liberia worked. It was revitalized, and it really contributed to the peaceful outcome of Liberia's election. And I think that for us having an IPAC that is almost defunct at this time, it really is retrogression on my part. And I think that it's important for all political parties to be on board to make sure that IPAC begins to function as it once functioned. Dr. Afari-Gyan, you're a legend. And it took me to be in ECOWAS to really appreciate what you bring to the table through your experience. I mean, when you talk about elections in West Africa, everybody mentions your name. When I say I'm from Ghana, and I was in the heat of elections in Liberia, everybody will ask me, "Oh, Dr. Afari-Gyan, eh?" So we must really leverage on the gem that we have. He is a national gem. We must appreciate him, and you should avail yourself to speak to Ghana and to the West African sub-region some more. Okay. I also realized that election funding in these times is becoming a very crucial issue. I saw in Liberia where the donor partners said they weren't funding, development partners were not funding elections in Liberia, as we saw in Ghana in 2020. And you see the impact on the national economy. It's important that we begin to talk about how we drive down the cost of elections, because it has an adverse impact on our national economies. So those conversations for me are very necessary, and I'm sure, Dr. Afari-Gyan, your experience would be very relevant to this discussion on how we drive down the cost of elections. 1 billion last election, I mean, we can tell you it can do so much for our country, and so we need to drive that down. And then somebody raised an issue on electoral violence victims. I was part of a committee that was set up by CDD that was looking into persons affected by electoral violence, and we began some good work on that. I don't know how far CDD has gone with it, but one of the issues was funding. So it will be important to follow up with CDD and find out what they've done on this. But above all, let me just say that Ghana is still a shining example in the West African sub-region when it comes to our democratic credentials, when it comes to how we conduct elections, how we're perceived to conduct elections, and as through a peaceful means. Ghana still stands so high. And when I was here, we were all part of, there's so much going wrong that could be done better. But out there is a different perception, and we need to keep up that image by having these kinds of conversations to truly deepen our democratic credentials here.
Discussion always comes up when it comes to the issue of fighting corruption. When you look at the Constitution, it's Article 88, I think, it talks about the Attorney General being a cabinet minister. It does not say that the Attorney General is actually the Minister of Justice. It's just by convention that we have done that over the years. So you can definitely have a Minister of Justice who's also not the Attorney General, even though I don't recollect that we've done that in recent history. If the person is asking this question because of the issue of fighting corruption, we are talking about the independence of the Attorney General and the fact that there should be no influence, because as the Attorney General is appointed by the President and sits in cabinet. And so, of course, there is a perception that there will be some influence on the Attorney General. But I don't think decoupling the Minister of Justice, from the Attorney General, is what will solve the situation. There are other ways. For example, create an independent DPP. We've seen the creation of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Another way is probably empower Chiraj to prosecute corruption-related cases. So yes, you can decouple it, but I don't think that actually solves the problem. Now, the second issue has to do with the cap on
Supreme Court
Justice. And is the question, should we cap it or not?
Yeah, that's your view.
Not to cap it. I mean, I think there are different views on this. My view is that capping it, I mean, it's about the person who appoints. In the past, we've never had more than 12, 13 Supreme Court justices, even though there's been no cap. In recent times, we've seen as many as 18. So I don't think the issue really has been the fact that there's no cap, because when there was no cap, nobody appointed more than a certain number. It's about the discipline of whoever is appointing to ensure that I do not appoint more than a certain number of judges. And the third one has to do with
whether there should be deputy ministers, whether we should scrap that whole office entirely.
I don't think so.
Okay.
We can't have deputy ministers. Not for all, maybe not all ministries need deputies.
Some do.
For example, the Attorney General will need deputies. Minister for Finance will need deputies. I don't want to mention any other office and say it's insignificant, but some will need, and some may not need.
Do you have any response to any of the comments from the audience before I come to Honorable Ghartey?
Okay, so let me just talk about the punitive measures in respect of failed election petitions. I don't think the argument was that once you go to court and you fail, then you should pay. I mean, sometimes some suits are so frivolous that it's obvious that punitive measures or punitive costs should be awarded. I think that's what we're talking about. And as the speaker indicated, the last two election petitions, presidential election petitions, were not frivolous in any way. And it's not just about presidential elections. There are also petitions in parliamentary elections and other elections. I'm sure you may even see some in district suits in district.
I have a question. There's a point that has been made that you decide to proceed to court to satisfy your financiers at all. There is another view that you go to the court to satisfy your foot soldiers who are angry and throwing stones at your convoy. What if, for the purpose of peace, go to court and then when you lose, then at least they have some other person to blame than you?
If it is frivolous, you go to court on a frivolous claim. I think that for every case, not just election-related disputes, there should be punitive costs. But I mean, if it's not, and there is merit in the case, why should you be mulcted in heavy costs or damages or whatever?
All right. Thank you. Before I go to Ghartey, he said something to you about the do or die that you said.
Okay, do.
He asked you to recant.
Do or do.
So you have amended. Because on Constitution, they didn't want to use die. Thank you so much. Honorable Ghartey. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll start from the last point. The question is frivolity. And as she said, from your own explanation, the last two presidential elections were not frivolous. And when you go to court, there's a difference between a frivolous and vexatious action and losing a case. I mean, you can lose a case even though it is not frivolous. It's the balance of probability. On the balance of probability, the courts believe A rather than B. But you run to court, and don't forget that we're not only talking about presidential elections. You run to court accusing Mr. Afari-Gyan after he has won an election that in some particular police station, you even mentioned a police station in Qatar, maybe AME Zion or something. But I know your brother, you can't hide. When I was deputy speaker, I was recognizing him all the time. He was my friend. That Mr. Afari-Gyan in Qatar, for example, has he did this here. Then you mentioned another place. He did that there. You actually mentioned places. No problem. You file your process in court. Now the time has come for you to come and prove your case. There's become a war. Then why did you go to court in the first place? And another thing that I didn't say about parliamentary elections too is that it should also be time-bound. The famous case of Isaac Amu, it went on for 4 years. You see, because just now what can happen is that, especially in these close elections, people can file 10 suits in court to create confusion generally. That even 10 of your MPs, and while they filed it, then they'll be saying that even the fact that they filed it, you cannot go to court. I mean, they'll create all kinds of confusion. So if it's within a particular period of time, and I restrict my what I'm saying to frivolous and vexatious matters, and I go further than punitive costs. You know that, first of all, they don't award punitive costs because they take it as public interest litigation. It's litigation in the interest of public. How can a lie that you know is a lie be public interest litigation? It's private interest lies. So they should punish you. Apart from that, they should even ban you for standing election for a period of time. Well, I mean, it's not every frivolous matter, but they should see that there should be a graduated sentence. Otherwise, we'll arrive at a situation that everybody who loses an election will run to court. Okay. And we can't afford that. Then they asked a question about the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. Can I answer that?
Yes, you're free to.
Okay. First of all, like she said, it says there shall be an Attorney General who shall be the chief. It doesn't say there shall be a Minister of Justice. And people make a lot of noise in quotes about the Minister of Justice position. It's nothing. He is just a supervisor over some agencies, Law Reform Commission, and so on. And they are not the boss there. They have a board, they have a chief director, they have a CEO. So what you do is that you take their budget to Parliament and you appoint people onto their board. The Registrar General is more or less independent. The Copyright Administrator in my time, Law Reform Commission, Legal Aid, they are all. The Registrar of Companies is now independent. So you can even take away the name Minister of Justice, but the person will perform the same function. Like she said, we have formed an Office of Special Prosecutor who is supposed to prosecute independently. What baffles me is that at the same time, when prosecution is not going on, then we blame the Attorney General. The Attorney General has not prosecuted anybody. But you formed an Office of Special Prosecutor. And perhaps what we need to do is to have clear prosecution guidelines. In the UK, there are prosecution guidelines. There are various bodies in the UK that can prosecute. Who can prosecute what? So the Attorney General is left in peace. And I speak for an Attorney General regardless of political persuasion. Because you don't form an Office of Special Prosecutor and then blame the Attorney General if he's not. The same man, if he goes to prosecute his friends, his political colleagues to do, say he did it because he wants to cover up. So we have put the Attorney General in an impossible position, and it's not right. And then he asked about this last question.
You served as a deputy minister. Is that a useless office that should be scrapped?
Not at all. You see, there are various reasons why people serve as deputy ministers. And in fact, when I was deputy minister, I heard that President Kufuor was about to do a reshuffle. And one very senior member of our party then told me that, oh, you've done well as deputy minister. I said, what have I done? I haven't done anything. He said, yes, but you've done well because you haven't done anything wrong. So you've done well. So then he said that, if I was President Kufuor, now you finished Attorney General, so I'll take you to Minister of Finance or Trade. I said, what am I going to do? They said, no. Deputy ministers, what they do in England is that they move you around. So by the time they are not preparing you for today. So by the time your government comes to power in 2008, so you are ready to be minister. There's one deputy minister sitting in this room, former deputy who wants to be minister. I know that because he's prepared. After, why are you, my friend? I won't mention any names. Because now he's prepared. It prepares you for the position. And in fact, I did as a...
He wants to be running mate, please. We've heard that too.
Okay. This man doesn't like any of us. Okay, that black, what have we done to him?
I haven't mentioned...
I've mentioned it.
I thought we were not mentioning names.
So what I'm saying is that as deputy minister, I must say that what I did as Attorney General, my role as deputy minister helped me a lot. So when I moved into the position, I wasn't completely blind. I mean, you can come straight from outside, private practice, you can be the best lawyer. When you walk into Attorney General's office, it's a different story. So it's a good position, but there are some ministries, with the greatest of respect, which may not need deputy ministers. And if you talk about a cap of Supreme Court judges. I'm not part of the appointments committee, but the last vetting of the Supreme Court judges, one of my classmates was being elevated to the high office of Supreme Court. One of the most brilliant people in our class. I won't tell you his nickname, but he's a maritime lawyer in Tema. And all the judges said without any hesitation that the amount of work that is now imposed on the Supreme Court, it said that if they don't have the numbers, they can't survive. Because in our Ghanaian constitution, everybody has a right to start from the High Court to the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. I was discussing this with a lawyer friend of mine, and he said that one of the saddest days in his life was sitting in the Supreme Court, where the whole panel, chaired by Her Ladyship, the Chief Justice, the then Supreme Court Chief Justice, was delivering a ruling on one room in a family house. A dispute over it had started in the High Court, went to the Court of Appeal, to the Supreme Court. Whether the Supreme Court liked it or not, they had to sit down.
So your view is that we should not cap it because the work may demand that we have more.
That is what all the judges said. The judges mentioned they have the constitutional jurisdiction. They have the super. That's what the judges said.
And you agree with them?
I don't know the amount of work.
All right.
When they asked Jesus that, are you the king of the Jews, what was his answer? You said it. I'm telling you what the Supreme Court judges said. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's give it to the chairman. Let him conclude for us. Okay.
Well, I think my colleagues have covered a lot of ground. Let me say that when we talk about petitions, we're not talking only about presidential election petitions. If it were only presidential election petitions, I don't think anybody would get worried about that. The petitions in the parliamentary elections are also, to be taken into consideration. There's some aspect of the petitions that you don't see. When they have sent it there, they go, amending the petition, and so on and so forth. Sometimes they amend 6 times in the same petition. Anyway, but we're talking about petitions which patently have no, and they're not likely to succeed by anybody's imagination. You can see that, those ones need to attract punitive actions. So that's when you say that the EC appears to be cozy with government in power, I think you have it all wrong. Let me tell you, when I was there, I knew President Mills very well from Achimota School in Legon, when me, him, and the current president used to play on the Legon football team. All right? Yes. The 3 of us, we used to play on the Legon football team. Mills never mentioned President. When I say Mills, what? He never mentioned my name. He had a nickname for me. And that's what, unless it's a public place, for example, he would never mention my name. But during his presidency, I had more trouble with his lieutenants than with anybody else. I had trouble with, people in the party than any other during any other government. So it is not true that relations between the EC and the government are always cozy. No. And then for your the course of elections, it's unfortunate. To you, as a candidate, very high. The Electoral Commission as But the course of elections, as far as the Electoral Commission is concerned, you people in Parliament, you sit down and look at the budget item by item and approve it. If there are anything there that you think are not necessary and so on, why don't you take it out? No, okay, yes, I say I need it, but we sit down and justify the need. I don't just send you the budget and then don't meet with you. You call me to come and justify all these things. Why do I need 20 tables? What am I going to do with them? And I have to justify them, every single item in there. So if there is any here, the two of us, the Electoral Commission and Parliament, we have to take collective responsibility for the rise in the course of elections. You are supposed to scrutinize the budget of the Electoral Commission and give them the... And let me tell you, you see now the donor partners are withdrawn. When I was in the commission, I never did a budget thinking that donors were going to give us money. I did a budget thinking that this is budget for the Ghana government to pay. If the Ghana government didn't have money and you want to go and ask people to, that was a different thing. The monies that we asked donors to give to us was for things that were not to support the core budget. All right? You want to go and do special education for handicapped people and so on, all right? You appeal to some of these things and they do it. So I'm not surprised that that they are withdrawn. But let us scrutinize the budgets very carefully. That is the only way. And on the other hand, let me say that if you don't give the Electoral Commission enough money, they are tempted to cut corners in their preparations. I suspected that the unwillingness of the Electoral Commission to go to the electoral area level was because they did not have money to do it. That was my suspicion. All right? That is my suspicion. Because they would have done it. As you go now, you are paying more. Because you are multiplying the equipment, you are multiplying the personnel. So please examine these things very carefully. And I also want to underscore this. Don't let us go to the IPAC with a belligerent attitude. Please. The postures are very important. All right? In my time, nobody would do that. But if you did it, I would let you know that it is unacceptable. So please, don't let us go there with posturing and so on. Let's go there and say that we're going there to have a good discussion. It's a give and take good discussion. But yes, I did recommend that the electoral and the NDC should go back to the IPAC. Because you see, the IPAC is for all the political parties, you see. And I don't agree that, there are small parties and big parties. But as long as they are on the books, and let me tell you, there was one time, there was one time when we did, a scrutiny of the things that we're supposed to have before, and we discovered that no party really, by decision, qualified. You see, so what we said is that we cannot do a partial interpretation of the law. That's what we said. Now maybe now, if you do the audit, some will qualify, but there was a time when look, and even after the audit, the kinds of tricks that sometimes the parties play. Now, there was a place I was in charge of the area, and there was these metal things. How do you call them? Yeah, container. I was in charge of the region, and I used to pass there all the time. it was a place where they used to sell cement. Then all of a sudden we announced to the parties that we're going to do, of course you have to tell them that we are going to do audit. And when there no cement, they had painted with the parties, symbol. What can you do? There was somebody there with a desk and this one. So we went there. So they have an office. We left. 3 weeks later, they were selling cement. In Accra here, there was a party in Accra here. But when you were supposed to have, regional office and office, they had an office in the room, and table and people here, table and people there. I said what they said. This is the regional office, and this is the office. So it is difficult to do the audit. It is difficult to do the audit. So they remain on the books. If they come, let them have a discussion. It's all right. And you see, it's not a place where you are going to vote and say that we voted and there was this and so on. Because, it's not a voting place. So let them join you and have a discussion. They may have a very interesting ideas to contribute. Okay.